Tune into the premiere of VI and We, a new bi-weekly talk show presented by active advocates and hosted by our political commentator, Anthony Mardenborough, Jr. On this episode, he will cover weekly Virgin Islands and national politics and catch up with his first guest, Nereida Nellie Rivera O'Reilly, former five-term senator in the United States Virgin Islands legislature and former write-in candidate in the 2024 general election. Watch as she's interviewed since the 2024 general election and how her journey has been designed for the people. Tune in on Saturday, December 14th, 2024 at 5 p.m. on Facebook and YouTube at Active Advocates to watch this groundbreaking show. See you there. VI and We, a new bi-weekly talk show presented by active advocates and hosted by our political commentator, Anthony Mardenborough, Jr. On this episode, he will cover weekly Virgin Islands and national politics and catch up with his first guest, Nereida Nellie Rivera O'Reilly, former five-term senator in the United States Virgin Islands legislature and former write-in candidate in the 2024 general election. Watch as she's interviewed since the 2024 general election and how her journey has been designed for the people. VI and We, a new bi-weekly talk show presented by active advocates and hosted by our political commentator, Anthony Mardenborough, Jr. On this episode, he will cover weekly Virgin Islands and national politics and catch up with his first guest, Nereida Nellie Rivera O'Reilly, former five-term senator in the United States Virgin Islands legislature and former write-in candidate in the 2024 general election. Watch as she's interviewed since the 2024 general election and how her journey has been designed for the people.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to VI in We. I have the pleasure of being the host and commentator of this show, and I'm Anthony Mardenborough Jr. And this is our first episode. It's about time that this show has come. It's about highlighting prolific Virgin Islanders who've made an impact in our community and, of course, talking politics. And so that's what I'm going to dive into just in a moment. But I wanted to just mention to those of you who will be joining us, who've been tuning in so far, thank you for participating. But we have a wonderful guest that's going to be joining us shortly. And you all already know who it is for our premiere episode, former Senator Nereida Nellie Rivera O'Reilly. And I look forward to that conversation that I'm about to have with her shortly. But as you know, I am known for talking politics, and I want to dive into a few politics before we begin this discussion. So one of the things I wanted the people to be aware of is that we just had the 2024 general election here in the United States Virgin Islands, and of course nationally. And Donald Trump has won the 2024 presidential election, while Kamala Harris was not successful in her bid to become the next president of the United States. As people were aware of, the Democrats lost. They don't have control of the House or the Senate. But the thing is, the Republicans now have something called a trifecta, which simply means that they control both chambers of Congress and they control the presidency. So the next 2 years for the Virgin Islands is going to be pretty interesting because we have a trifecta, and where our delegate to Congress, who was just elected again in the 2024 general election here locally, delegate to Congress, Stacey Plaskett. She was chosen to be sent back to Congress to represent us, and I, um, I'm just worried about where we're moving forward. What plan? I really would like her to come out and highlight what plan she has in place to ensure that that she is going to be able to get the agenda of the people of the Virgin Islands done. And so, about a week or two ago, Governor Bryan and his team went to Washington, D.C. to basically talk to the lobbyists up there, talk to different individuals who are in Congress to make sure that they take on some of the priorities needed to get the agenda of the people moving forward. And I hope the conversation they had was very productive. I just think it's time for us to turn the leaf. And where we are in the Virgin Islands, I mean, the people of the Virgin Islands are just, they're frustrated. And I think it's time for us to begin moving forward with some new ideas, some new visions, and some new implementations. And quite frankly, accountability. That's what's needed. We could sit around and try to play with the word accountability, but that's what's needed to propel us to move forward. And I think we just need to keep putting our points, keep pushing our officials to make sure that they understand that you are held responsible to us. We are the ones who elected you. We are the ones who chose you to represent us in Congress, in the legislature, wherever we choose. We're the ones that chose you to represent us, and we have to keep reminding them that and actually holding them accountable. Well, on the flip side, in the Virgin Islands, we just like we had the 2024 presidential election, we just had the 2024 general election here locally. And the people of the Virgin Islands have spoken and they've chosen who their senators are going to be for the next 2 years for the 36th legislature. And the list includes the following: Senator Milton Potter, Kenneth Gittins, Avery Lewis, Kurt Violet, Novell Francis, Carla Joseph, Marvin Blyden, Angel Bolquez, Ray Fonseca, Maurice James, Hubert Frederick, Clifford Joseph, Dwayne M. DeGraff, Alma Francis Heiliger, Franklin Johnson, and that is what makes up the 36th legislature of the Virgin Islands for the next 2 years. The 35th legislature of the Virgin Islands is about to end in the next couple of days. They're about to go on something called Sindai, which means that unless there's emergency matters that they need to respond before the next legislature is in, they're essentially closed. So this is what they call the lame duck period of politics, especially in the legislature, because not much bills are being passed, not much things are being done, because the term is about to end. However, two incumbents on the District of St. Croix were not chosen to represent them again in the 2026 session, which is the 36th legislature. And those were Senators Diane Capehart and Senator Samuel Carrion. Of course, on the island of St. Thomas, all of the incumbents were elected except Donna Fred Gregory, who has decided not to run for re-election, but to, spend some personal time with her family, and that gave up the seat where Avery Lewis was able to succeed in garnering that seat. The projected formation of the legislature just come out, and I am intrigued about the list of individuals who are going to be representing in first leadership, and then of course in the different committees. So you have Milton Potter, who is projected to be the next Senate president. He was a top vote getter in the St. Thomas and John district this election season. You have Kenny Gittins, which is slated to become the vice president of the legislature. And Senator Kenny Gittins was originally originally the president of the 33rd legislature, but in May of 2019, I want to believe, in May of 2019, there was a shift. They decided to choose now President Novell Francis. He's now the president of the 35th legislature, but he became the president of the 33rd legislature from May 2019 forward until the legislature ended. So that's interesting to see how he's going to lead as vice president. And our next guest, our guest that will be joining on shortly, she was a vice president of the legislature. And that'd be interesting for us to talk about to see what kind of impact she had being a vice president. Um, then I continue. Avery Lewis was the secretary, is projected to be the secretary, and Kurt VLA is projected to be the majority leader. So Kurt VLA stepped away from the legislature in 2022 so he can run for governor. He wasn't successful in that bid. However, he was able to become the top vote getter in the St. Croix district and return back to the legislature. So he will become a senator, a part of the 36th legislature in the next couple of weeks. Then, of course, committees now. So the Committee on Budget, Appropriations, and Finance will now be Novell E. Francis Jr. So Kurt VLA will break his track because Kurt VLA was one of the first individuals to have a committee consecutively back to back. He was the chair of the Finance Committee for the 32nd, 33rd, and 34th legislatures. And so he's going to be breaking his trajectory. And now he's coming in to be the chair of the Committee on Education and Workforce Development. And now Senate President Novell Francis is coming in to be the projected chair of the Committee on Budget, Appropriations, and Finance. So that will be interesting to see how Senator Novell Francis chairs that committee. And we all know Kurt VLA is a former educator. Once you're an educator, you're always an educator. And it'll be interesting to see what his priorities are going to be to make sure that the Department of Education fulfills the requirements needed to get our children back on track. Then the Committee on Rules and Judiciary will be chaired by Senator Carla Joseph. Housing, Transportation, and Communication, Telecommunications will remain with Senator Marvin Blyden. Culture, Youth, Aging, Sports, and Parks will remain with Senator at Large Angel Bokes Jr. Health, Hospitals, and Human Services will remain with Senator Ray Fonseca. In this legislature, they made it a super committee, meaning they had 9 members on that committee because it was very important. I would like to see that for the next committee, the next legislature that to tackle WAPA. I think that committee needs to be a super. That's just my opinion. Then you have Disaster Recovery, Infrastructure, and Planning, which will be now chaired by Senator Maurice James. And her as an attorney, I think will bring a perspective on that committee in ensuring that planning and infrastructure meets the codes, meets the laws, and that we actually fulfill the mandates to make sure the projects are completed. And then Economic Development and Agriculture will be chaired by Senator-elect Hubert Frederick, who ran for the Senate this year, was successful, but he ran 2 years ago and he wasn't successful by 6 points. So when people tell you votes don't count, they do. He wasn't able to serve in the 35th because he was short by 6 points, 6 votes. So he was able to be elected this time around, and I'm interested to see how he's going to do that, especially with his economic background. And then Homeland Security, Justice, and Public Safety is Clifford Joseph. And then last but not least, Government Operations, Veteran Affairs, and Consumer Protection is slated to be chaired by Senator Avery Lewis, which is a current administrator of St. Thomas Water Island District. So I'm interested to see how his experience as being the administrator of that district can play in his leadership governing or chairing the Committee on Government Operations, Veterans Affairs, and Consumer Protection. So that is the lineup of the projected formation of the 36th legislature of the Virgin Islands. And I want people to just continue paying attention. These individuals are about to serve us in the next couple of weeks. And we can't forget about the Board of Elections. The Board of Elections has a total shift. The people of the Virgin Islands have elected some new individuals to the Board of Elections. So some of the individuals that you're going to be seeing for the next 4 years on the board includes Cleopatra Peter, Barbara Laurent. You definitely can't forget Lawrence Bosholti. You're going to be seeing Cornelius John Baptiste. So there are some new faces that are coming to the Board of Elections, and we're interested to see what direction they're going to take in terms of Supervisor Caroline Fox, who's been in the news lately for bias and taking the Board of Elections, which is her boss, to court because they decided to rule on having former candidate for Congress, Ida Smith, on the ballot. So that's what's just been happening in the Virgin Islands community. And people need to just be aware of what's happening, what's going on, and staying in tuned. And our next guest is one of those individuals who's been impacting the community before she even got on the scene and has been doing it since. Even though she wasn't successful in the general election, she's still been advocating. So we're going to take a short break. We're going to play a little intro quickly, and then when we get back, I am going to have the pleasure of introducing the guest, and then we're going to begin having our conversation. So stay tuned.
Tune into the premiere of VI and We, a new bi-weekly talk show presented by active advocates and hosted by our political commentator, Anthony Mardenborough, Jr. On this episode, he will cover weekly Virgin Islands and national politics and catch up with his first guest, Nereida Nellie Rivera O'Reilly, former 5-term senator in the United States Virgin Islands legislature and former write-in candidate in the 2024 general election. Watch as she's interviewed since the 2024 general election and how her journey has been designed for the people. Tune in on Saturday, December 14th, 2024 at 5 p.m. on Facebook and YouTube at Active Advocates to watch this groundbreaking show. See you there. Tune into the VI and We, a new bi-weekly talk show presented by active advocates and hosted by our political commentator, Anthony Mardenborough, Jr. On this episode, he will cover weekly Virgin Islands and national politics and catch up with his first guest, Nereida Nellie Rivera O'Reilly, former 5-term senator in the United States Virgin Islands legislature and former write-in candidate in the 2024 general election. Watch as she's interviewed since the 2024 general election and how her journey has been designed for the people.
And we're back. Thank you for staying with us. And again, we were just talking about politics earlier. And my next guest is someone who has definitely made an impact in the political scene here in the Virgin Islands, specifically for St. Croix. Many people know her for being a strong advocate for the district of St. Croix, especially when things are not always seen in the best interest for us. She's one of those individuals that sticks up for the district of St. Croix. And I have the pleasure of interviewing someone who was in the legislature, served 5 terms in the legislature, and has made extreme impact, especially in the field of mental health. And she's now a business owner, and I'm going to allow her to dive into more into that as we ask more questions. But I have the pleasure of bringing on former Senator Nereida Nellie Rivera O'Reilly. How are you doing, former Senator?
I'm good. I'm good. How are you?
I'm all right, hanging in there, can't complain. So I'm excited to have you
Congratulations.
on.
Congratulations on your maiden voyage.
Yes, thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm excited, like I said, to have this show and just really educating people and giving them some real conversations that are not scripted, but something that I think they can go out with and actually reflect on and remember and actually look at it and be positive and see we're not trying to get sales, but we're trying to actually impact lives with the conversations that we're having. So I want to thank you for accepting the invite to be the first guest on the show. So my first question is, how are you since the 2024 general election? How are you keeping up? And where is your mind at thus far?
I take it you want to know how I'm feeling after not winning.
Yes.
I'm fine. Actually, I'll be honest with you, I don't even know how many write-in votes we received. So- because we did the best we could to stay
Mhm,
visible, but I knew it was an uphill battle, and everybody around me also knew that. But I feel good about the work that we did. Um, it really gave me an opportunity to go back out and
mhm,
talk to people and just see the conditions of our island. I always told people that
mhm,
I was living under a rock for a while,
mhm,
and this year has been very different for me, and I'm thrilled. I have bad days, obviously we all do, but um, good days are outweighing the bad days. And so I'm excited that this year has been a better year for me mentally and emotionally. And what better time to try to connect with my community again than this time. So yeah, I'm feeling fine. And it was like out of the general election smack quickly into work. I was always working. I never stopped working. But we are in the middle of the busiest season for the
mhm.
business, and so I haven't skipped a beat. I have no time for that.
Good, 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 good. Yes. So, before we come back to the present, I just want the people who are not familiar with who you are to just give them a little background about yourself, and what inspired you to get into politics.
Sure. So very quickly, I was born in a state profit in Machuchal, and my parents moved us from there to a state Calhoun when I was in the third grade. And I've lived there. We lived there for the rest of my childhood and young adulthood. I um, I graduated from St. Croix Central High School. I attended the University of the Virgin Islands. I studied paralegal studies there. I eventually settled for business management and finance. Have a degree in business management and finance. I served on the board of education. That's where my political life began. Prior to that,
Mhm,
I had been very involved in many organizations, nonprofit organizations, many of them focusing mostly in bringing awareness within the Hispanic community and trying to build the Hispanic community in St. Croix, because we were underrepresented politically and in all phases of government. So I was very involved in that, and then I ran for the Board of Education. I was elected. I served one term, which is 4 years. And then
mhm.
in 2008, I ran for the Senate. We were elected and we served for 5 terms, a total of 10 years.
Yeah, great, 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 great. So, yeah, I wanted people to just be aware, and I'm glad you mentioned it. So, the legislature didn't really have much of a Hispanic representation, and so you were able to come in and actually make that impact. And I think that played a role in some of the policies and the ideas that you were able to get through in the legislature. So as I was talking earlier, you came in the scene, and which legislature did you become the vice president of? I don't remember which
And
one.
the last legislature when I left,
Mhm.
so I served in the 28th, 29th, 30th, 31st, and 32nd.
Yeah,
So in the 22nd legislature, I was vice president under the president was Senator Jackson.
no. Okay, great, 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 great. So, um, what was that experience like being a officer in the legislature and being a woman, especially?
Well, I will remind you that when I got elected in 2008, I was the only woman in the entire body. So there were 14 men.
Hmm.
So that was quite an experience, and I plan on writing a memoir someday. Uh, Remember that I was a member of the majority only one term, and that was my final term.
Hmm.
And it was during that term that I chaired a committee for the first time and that I was the vice president of the legislature. So, what was that like? The vice president has very little power. The president makes all of the decisions.
Mhm.
Vice president seems to be more ceremonial.
Mhm.
You attend events that the president is unable to, especially except for like manage emergency response. In that case, because there's such a separation and sometimes communications are down, the vice president seems to take the role of kind of leading the Senate on this
Mhm.
side of the aisle in St. Croix. So I was serving as a vice president when both Maria and Irma came by.
Mhm.
And so there was, there was no communication between St. Thomas and St. Croix, as you know. It was
Mhm.
quite it was very particularly for us it was very stressful being an elected official when there is such destruction on both, I mean, all three islands, as
Yes.
were decimated. The communication went down, and it's a lot. You have a lot of responsibilities. People are looking to you for answers. So I would say that as the vice president, literally there is very little authority because the president pretty much makes all the decisions and runs the institution. But you do step in when needed.
Good. 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 So now we're talking about the legislature, and that's where people really, really know you from. And I want to just know what three policies do you think that you've drafted that you still see has a real impact in our present times?
Yeah, I would say the first measure, which was one of the first, the mammography access, expanding access to mammography. That that has only it improves every year. It's life saving. And
Mm-hmm.
so many women come to me and tell me, I got my mammogram and thank you. So it's one of those legislations that has impacted lives more than I can ever imagine or explain.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a very simple fix, right? I mean, it took a
Mm-hmm.
lot of cajoling to get the members to support it because there was a lot of politics in the
Mm-hmm.
legislature. And I don't know that, that's when I say I want to write a memoir. I think that people don't understand that, what that looks like
Mm-hmm.
when you're not in the majority and you're a member of the minority, but somehow your legislation seems to be very popular, and you have to fight. You have to fight just to
Yes.
for the legislation to come to get drafted, and then to make it to the committee, and then to make it to the floor to fund it. So it was an uphill battle, but at the end of the day, it passed, and so that's probably one of the most impactful yet today.
Mm-hmm.
On our way out, we passed the $250 million authorization for the Garvey bonds.
Mm-hmm.
55% of that, whatever got floated, was slated for St. Croix, and the other 45 for St. Thomas. And the Garvey
Mm-hmm.
bonds were to be used to reconstruct our roads and our bridges. And today we still see, we still continue to see some of that work. I'm not,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's a good thing. It's taken 7 years almost to
Mm-hmm.
get it done, but that was an uphill battle too. Try asking St. Thomas to allow St. Croix to have a little bit more, right?
Mm-hmm.
That instead of the usual 50-50, we were able to convince them to give us 55%. And then we passed the legislation really ahead of our times. We passed legislation that reduces the number of years that an inmate serves based on completing training and education. And we felt strongly that the cost of keeping an inmate behind the cell and not
Mm-hmm.
providing them with the skills they needed to become contributing members of society, that wasn't working for us because recidivism was a thing. So unless
Mm-hmm.
you have been sentenced to life, you have a chance of coming back out, and so
Mm-hmm.
you should come back out, right, with
Mm-hmm.
some ability to get a job. And so we passed the sentence reduction bill, and that has been up to in June. I attended the second graduation at the prison here in St. Croix, and it was really heartwarming to see. It was 23 graduates,
Mm-hmm.
and so that is a thriving program, and it's part of the second chances that we all believe in.
Yes. yes. So thank you for that, and I really and that just shows the work of being a senator, because a lot of people out here, they campaign, oh, I'm gonna get the roads fixed, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that, and the public is kind of tired of hearing that narrative. They want to actually see results, and most know that senators don't do that. That's not their responsibility. That's the executive branch. So I wanted to just talk about that shortly. So, being a senator and serving 5 terms, what was your relationship in terms of getting the executive branch to complete or actually fulfill the laws that you were able to get passed?
So I believe that part and parcel of being a senator is not just proposing legislation, right? I think that
Mm-hmm.
I know, because it worked for me, that you have to establish relationships with the head of agencies and commissioners
Mm-hmm.
and deputy commissioners. That doesn't mean you have to agree on everything, but I think at the end of the day, they see that you have an interest in improving conditions for everyone, and in some cases focus on whatever area they work in.
Mm-hmm.
So that was critical to us. It's knowing the commissioners and knowing the directors and having a direct line to them or to their assistants, so that when we pass legislation, we can stay on top of it, right? And we can follow
Yeah.
up, and not it wasn't a matter of trying to castigate anyone, right?
Mm-hmm.
But be of help and encourage and assist. What are the things that are getting in your way? Why is this legislation not being enacted or implemented? A lot of times
Mm-hmm.
it had to do with they're overwhelmed, right?
Mm-hmm.
We never really passed unfunded legislation, so it wasn't that it wasn't funded. They were overwhelmed and they were doing too many things, and they didn't have enough staff
Mm-hmm.
to do this. So I would imagine in my case that it's because we had built relationships with the agencies. You don't necessarily work directly with the governor or the office of the
Mm-hmm.
governor, unless you want to meet with the governor because there is a legislation that you have that you'd like to make sure the governor understands it,
Mm-hmm.
that it would be veto proven, right? You don't want him to
Mm-hmm.
you want it to be veto proof, so you want him to know what's coming.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that was also helpful to us. We didn't have a good relationship with the administration under Governor John DeYoung.
Mm-hmm.
I admit that there were a lot of matters that came before the legislature for borrowing that I didn't believe were
Mm-hmm.
justified, and so I didn't support it. And so usually the government house sees someone who votes against their measures as you know as the enemy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so, and I wish I had a better word to use, but it's been a long
Mm-hmm.
day. And so, yeah, so those are the challenges. And then on the governor map, it was kind of different. We had a good relationship. I was able to have conversations with him and be able to speak to his legal counsel whenever matters were coming through, to make sure that they understood what we were trying to do.
Mm-hmm. Yes, because we can. I'm glad you mentioned that, because senators can propose legislation, get it passed, but if it's not executed, then there is no real purpose of it being passed. So it has to come into fruition, and it has to actually be done. And I think that's the problem that people are having specifically with this administration, which we'll get to in just a moment. But they're having issues because they feel like
Okay.
the legislature and the executive branch are at odds, and it's not trying to be cohesive to get the agenda completed. And so that's some of the concerns that I heard in this election cycle. And that's always been an
Mm-hmm.
issue. Because this is politics. However, it's really been something this past couple of years where some of the senators and the governor and his team have been at odds with legislation, specifically with WAPA, specifically with finance. So we're gonna dive into that, but I just want the public to
Okay.
understand that in order for bills and in order for laws to actually be executed the way they're supposed to, the relationship is supposed to be there. And like Senator O'Reilly just mentioned, you don't have to agree on everything, However, some solution has to be in place because you owe it to the public. They elected you, they chose you to represent them. That's why we don't have 100 senators. That's why we don't have 88,000 governors, because we would never agree or get anything done. So we had to have elect some individuals who are will be willing enough to sit and compromise, even if that means they might have to take out a section or change words in a section
Hmm.
or change how it was going to be implemented, because that is the essence of governance, and people need to understand that. So let's talk about your 2024 election campaign. So, just explain that journey to us, because there's some individuals, as you know, you have those little bugs that are online, that Twitter and comment every little thing, and they don't even know the background of why you decided to run. They don't know the intent. So, I wanted to just ask a question, and then you could kind of tell us your journey from announcing when you want to run, and then to where you are now. But I wanted the public to be aware that um, earlier this year you petitioned, you wrote a letter of intent to run as a writing candidate for the 2024, the actual general election.
Hmm.
And one of the things that came out was you filed different names to use to run as a candidate. And there were some individuals out there that were was like, this lady's out of her mind. They don't know why is she doing that. And so I wanted to dive into that just a second, but kind of guide us to from where you decided to run, um what were the priorities you had, and then after the primary election, because you did run in the primary election, after the that election, what was your mindset moving into the general election, and then what were your thoughts about the things you're hearing about why you decided to do your write-in candidacy like that.
Yeah, I really haven't had much time to think about it after the general election results. I was watching a portion of the results that were being, because you were doing one, and
Mm-hmm.
and then there was channel 12, WTJX was doing another one, so I was kind of trying to go between,
Mm-hmm.
to kind of get an idea of how the young people were looking at this versus
Yes.
what
Mm-hmm.
WTJX was doing. And so I heard the commentaries from the part of the members of the panel.
Mm-hmm.
In particular, former Senator, and I always call him Senator Alfonsi Donna Stork had an opinion about my coming back to run for office, as did Miss Jamila Russell. I don't remember the name of the other people that were on the panel, but it was hilarious because they were laughing as though it was funny, but it wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they had ideas and opinions about the reasons why I didn't run in
Mm-hmm.
2000, when I left the legislature and after the 32nd.
Yes.
I was clear as to the reason why, right?
Mm-hmm.
I said that it was time for me to spend some time with my family. My
Mm-hmm.
son, who had been incarcerated since 2013,
Mm-hmm.
was finally in 2018, he was finally diagnosed with schizophrenia, and
Mm-hmm.
was going to be either hospitalized or was going to be tried.
Mm-hmm.
And it was then when I knew exactly what his condition was, and I understood how important it was for me to be more involved in what
Mm-hmm.
was happening. And so I decided that I needed to step aside and spend more time understanding his condition and what was happening and
Mm-hmm.
where it would lead him. My father was also, he had been very sick, and my mom had had a mastectomy a couple of years
Mm-hmm.
before that. So I wanted to spend more time with my family. And that is why I decided not to run in 2018.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, no one begged me to run. That's not
Mm-hmm.
true. I don't think that I am not cotton candy. I'm not the most likable person. So no one begged me to run this time or any time. I made
Mm-hmm.
decisions based on what was in my heart, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what I felt was important for me to do. So these individuals are misinformed, but I understand that
Mm-hmm.
sometimes spreading misinformation salacious stuff. It kind of makes it more appealing, and it makes you feel
Mhm.
relevant. That's good for them. I don't need to do anything to make me feel relevant.
Mhm.
I decided to run this year because, listen, as a business owner, I'm part owner of Sonia's. I in
Mhm.
Christiansted. I live it. I see it every single
Mhm.
day. Every single day. I don't spend my time working for government. Government has not
Mhm.
been my lifetime employer, right? And
Mhm.
I understood clearly that we need to do something for St. Croix. We still do. And
Mhm.
when the young lady in St. Thomas was arrested for the alleged murder of her daughter, that is what really made me made me consider running for Senate, because I understood that not enough people were talking about mental health and how that
Mhm.
impacts our community more broadly. And that is the reason why I decided to run. And I chose to run as a Democrat because I had left the legislature as a Democrat. And I
Mhm.
didn't want to run from the party, even though I knew that the members of the party, of the leadership in the party, were not happy with me. Why? Because I endorsed Senator Kurt Viale when he ran for governor.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
I ran in the primary, and there was a concerted effort by some members of the leadership in the party to block my candidacy.
Mhm.
They sent Mr. Cecil Benjamin demanded that I apologize publicly for having endorsed Senator Kurt Viale, and I refused to do so.
Mhm.
I didn't make the cut, and I
Mhm.
decided that I would stay in the race because I still had a message, and I wasn't going to let Cecil Benjamin, get in my way. That's
Mhm.
how my parents raised me.
Yeah.
And so I stayed in the race as a write-in candidate, and that's that's what happened.
Mhm. Yes. Yes.
And
Yes.
so,
Yes.
just briefly to finish off on the reason why so they told me that I needed to submit a list of all probable names,
Mhm.
and of course, if you ask me to submit a list of all probable names, I'm going to give you a list of all probable
Yeah.
names to include not Crazy Nellie, not Nellie, and all of those things that I know people would literally go and write. And in fact, if you
Mhm.
read the names of of the things that people wrote, some people wrote God, Jesus. I mean, there were some things that were out there. I don't know if you remember reading them, if you
Mhm.
saw them. So I was trying to capture every possibility that could
Mhm.
be intended for good or for harm.
Mhm. Yes. So I'm glad
And
you
so that's
mentioned
what
that.
I did.
Yes, and so the public, you were able to just get a recap of what her journey was like from when she first decided to run, for the legislature this term. You wasn't successful in the primary, and then she decided to run, continue her campaign in the general election. Just for the record, I want people to be aware of this. Current Lieutenant Governor Tregenza Roach, he originally was an independent also. He switched to becoming a Democrat and then ran on the ticket with now Governor Brian to make the Brian Roach team. So I wanted people to just be aware that also happened, but I didn't see the Democratic Party demanding an apology from him, or anything like that. So just to be aware of that. People just keep your eyes open and just to understand what's going on with the politics here in the Virgin Islands and how it could be pretty interesting. Just for the record, I also wanted to mention that I was a candidate for the Virgin Islands Board of Elections this cycle. I wasn't successful in the primary, but I wanted people to just be aware that people are running, and you have to stay tuned and actually be engaged and be involved. But I'm glad you shared your story with people so that people can understand the rumors that are going on. They have no truth to it. You're very open and transparent, and people need to be aware of that. So thank you for sharing that, and thank you for being open and honest with me and everybody who's tuning in to sharing that with us. So um I want to just thank you for that. Now, as you know, the people have decided who their senators are going to be. What do you see, or what are three priorities you would like the legislature this time around to tackle for the people, specifically on the island of St. Croix?
Oh, we need to. They need to. The energy crisis needs to be resolved,
Mm-hmm.
and the only way that we can do that is by understanding that St. Croix and St. Thomas are two very different economies
Yes.
and two very different islands. Right? We may be a
Mm-hmm.
territory, and I get it. But St. Croix has resources or lacks resources that St. Thomas has.
Mm-hmm.
So, in order for us to be able to address our energy crisis, people say, well, you can't get rid of WAPA, right? So maybe that is so, because it's not something that you can do immediately. But there are a few things that you can do right away. And that would
Mm-hmm.
be uh, eliminating the blending of rates.
Mm-hmm.
We blend the LEAC, right? We blend the cost of the fuel uh, across the islands rather than based on consumption. And I
Mm-hmm.
argue that there is greater consumption and greater expenditure on the St. Thomas St. John Water Island side than they are on the St. Croix Island. And so the blending should be eliminated. And we need to really engage with the refinery. They have a power plants
Mm-hmm.
that they can provide the entire island of St. Croix with power. That asset is sitting right there, and they have said that they are willing. They have said that they are willing to do a number of things to include waste to energy, but
Mm-hmm.
the agencies are not sitting down with them. They are not able to get anyone to come to the table and have conversations about how these things can happen. And I'm telling you that if we don't address the energy crisis, I see it every day. Families are going without electricity. That's very
Mm-hmm.
stressful. I see it all the time, and the power outages are just, it's not sustainable for anyone. So I would ask the St. Croix senators to show some muscularity and to start the conversation about eliminating the need to blend and bifurcating the authority so that we can take care of whatever the issues are in St. Thomas, which is trying to get those propane, the power, the equipment rolling, and then
Mm-hmm.
focusing on St. Croix and seeing what other assets are here that we can use. Healthcare is it's a number one priority along with energy. I was disappointed that Senator Villet is not the chair of the health committee because I know
Mm-hmm.
that him and I both share a lot of the same visions and
Mm-hmm.
passion for healthcare. I'm not at all impressed with any of the work that the current chair has done. Actually, I had no idea what he's done. And so healthcare is critical for all of us. Health is wealth, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I like us to start talking about getting our hospital built.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
It's been 7 years. It's been 7 years, for goodness sake.
Mm-hmm.
There is no reason why we haven't been able to get that going, and I don't think there is enough of a sense of urgency on behalf
Mm-hmm.
of our policymakers to get healthcare up and going. And then thirdly, they need to focus on the economy. I know that that Hubert Frederick is the chair of that committee, and I hope that there's going to be some conversation about what we're going to do to move the St. Croix and the St. Thomas economy forward. We're two different islands, Anthony,
Mm-hmm.
and St. Croix has a lot of room for growth. I'm not
Yes, we do.
suggesting that we, blow the doors open and say, open it to 20,000 tourists a day. But
Mm-hmm.
there are so many other things that we could do on St. Croix that can really improve our economy so that our people can afford, can get jobs and afford housing. So those would be my three priorities. The same priorities that I run on, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, 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 yes. So, um, talking about Garbage bonds, you talked about that earlier. When you were a senator, you were able to get some things done. In terms of that, the government, the legislature of the Virgin Islands, just approved a proposal. Governor Brian had proposed to the legislature to use some funding to improve transportation across the districts. And there's been a lot of conversation, not from the St. Croix senators, but there's been a lot of conversation from the public who feels betrayed by the senators on the St. Croix district who did not scrutinize the proposal enough. Because we're getting less, the St. Croix district is getting less of the funding. So I would like to know your thoughts since you are a strong St. Croix advocate. What are your thoughts when you first heard of the proposal? And what do you think the priorities need to be in terms of transportation in regards to that proposal?
Yeah. So here's what happened, right? I'll give you one quick example. Many years ago, when my during my first term, I was in a and I was not in a majority, and Senator Uzi Richards also was not a member of the majority, but he was my seatmate, sat next to me.
Mm,
There was something called back then it was the American Recovery Relief Act under
mm,
President Obama, because we were under that there was a recession,
yes.
and the Virgin Islands got some money. And so there was like a $90 million package that came across our desks uh, in like at midnight, the end of a session. Usually the majority would put this together. They then send it to us, and then you have to vote. And I remember sitting
Mm-hmm,
there doing the math. And listen, it was sad. It was so sad. It was so
mm-hmm,
pathetic because the senators from St. Croix just settled for laptops, you know,
mm-hmm,
and for carts for computers rather than big ticket items, while the St. Thomas senators pushed for big ticket items. And so that was my first experience with how these things work. And so when I read about this, I wasn't surprised. I was angry. I was
mm-hmm,
angry because you can't say that this ferry is a St. Croix ferry. No, 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 no. You don't get away with
mm-hmm,
that. You don't get away with
mm-hmm,
that. That particular project is a territorial project,
mm-hmm,
and that should be set aside from anything that you claim is for St. Croix versus St. Thomas. This 50-50 does not work. 50-50 is not always fair, right?
mm-hmm,
Our needs are more significant. So most people who I talk to, they're happy that the ferry is coming because they can bring cars and it can improve commerce between islands. I am not happy that the proposal wasn't scrutinized enough. I don't I don't know if the senators really drill down into who these people are. What is it
mm-hmm,
that they bring to the table? And what is it that they're gonna walk away with? Because it happened too fast.
mm-hmm,
Too fast, that's a sign.
mm-hmm.
I am
Yes.
not saying that it's not going to I'm not saying that it's not gonna work out. All I am saying is that it is not a St. Croix project. It's a territorial project. And to try to say that we got was it 40 million?
Mm, I think so. I
Is
think
it a
so.
40 million? Is it a 40 million? Right? To say,
Yeah.
oh, well, that 40
I
million is
think
for
so.
St. Croix for a ferry. No, that's not for St. Croix. That's for the
Mm-hmm,
territory. And so I
mm-hmm,
think that funding that went back and forth wasn't fair enough for St. Croix. And I don't believe that this particular transaction with the ferry has been deliberated well. The due diligence, I think, is lacking. And I would not be surprised if it comes back to bite us. I would not be
yeah, and I
surprised.
want to just mention to the public, when I first heard of the proposal, I was just trying to figure out what data did they have, did the administration have to prove that this is something needed for the district. So I just I really, really need people to understand what the issue that we need to address is public transportation on the island of St. Croix. We barely have Vitrons running. Some people, our elderly, are waiting sometimes 2 hours for a bus to reach to where they need to be going to, and St. Croix is only so big. So I think what we need, that money was supposed, I believe, what it should have gone to was for us to improve our public transportation on the island of St. Croix. That means getting new buses. That means improving our bus stops. Whatever
Hmm.
it takes to get public transportation where it needs to be, so that people don't need to be waiting a whole 2 hours for transportation. I think is the direction that the administration should have went in terms of improving our transportation. And while I'm on the topic of transportation, the Taxi Cab Commission has been going through some obstacles and some challenges the past couple of months. And with the height of rideshare companies in the Virgin Islands that are
Hmm.
operating illegally, I wanted to just know your thoughts on that with the Taxi Cab Commission and transportation as a whole
I think the
in the
taxi cab
territory.
commission is it's like a mafia on wheels, and And you know, I think change sometimes is hard, but change, you can't stop it. You can't
Mm-hmm.
stop it. I mean, you can delay it, but you never stop it. um
Mm-hmm.
I believe that we need to be open to other options. I believe that rideshare is that we're ripe for that. Why? You just said it. The public
Mm-hmm.
transportation through Vitron, it's unreliable, right? Even the
Yep.
paratransit, which is the one for people that, you know, with disabilities and other issues.
Mm-hmm.
I know someone who flew off his wheelchair and broke his femur and ended up dead a week later in the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
Because the bus landed into a pothole and he wasn't strapped properly.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe that the rideshare industry should be given a chance, should be given an opportunity for sure. It will allow for people who have no transportation to be able to get out and don't have to wait for a taxi. It is cheaper, it is
Mm-hmm.
reliable, and I believe that it is safe. There are some mechanisms you can put in place to make sure that people who are riding these with these individuals are safe. So I
Mm-hmm.
support it 100%. I don't believe that should continue to baby the taxi drivers.
Thank you for that. So I want to just go through some quick topics that are of
Hmm.
urgency for the people of St. Croix before we wrap up. So we
Hmm.
just talked about transportation, education. That was another priority of the people of the Virgin Islands, and not only here but nationally.
Hmm.
Education and where some of the issues that we're seeing in education, and what are some things that senators or lawmakers can do. So, what are some of your ideas and thoughts that you think people can get done for education in the territory?
Well, I think we have to invest in the infrastructure. I think our schools are too old, our buildings are too
Mm-hmm.
old. And you send children who are already stressed into a building
Mm-hmm.
that is distressed. I don't believe that that is conducive to learning.
Yeah.
I would say that we have to invest in the infrastructure, right? I'm very disappointed with the fact that we continue to cut the hours of learning. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, we've already had the learning loss that continues to grow because we're just not nimble enough and we're not addressing the root cause. So what could be done quickly is we need to figure out how we consolidate, right?
Mm-hmm.
Consolidate, make sure that the next summer that we start making these repairs from day one, and that
Mm-hmm.
someone, like, you know, you were talking about a super committee the other day,
Yes.
earlier today. So the other day I was talking to someone that we need to have the Senate should create a committee that is going to do nothing but look at these grants and make sure that they know the deadlines to be spent,
Mm-hmm.
and bring these people into their offices. You don't have to have a hearing in public, and stay
Mm-hmm.
on top of these grants because a lot of that money is for education,
Mm-hmm.
and ensure that we have something rolled out in June to start repairing the schools. That would be for me a number one priority. Obviously, teachers want to get paid better, but I think teachers
Mm-hmm.
want to work in an environment that it's it's conducive to learning, and I think it's just very stressful.
Yes. Yes.
So
Yes.
my suggestion is a committee that
Mm-hmm.
is going to have complete oversight of grant monies, particularly the education funds.
Yes. What about homeless? What are your
Now,
thoughts on homeless? And what ideas do you think we can put in place to get homelessness, to decrease the amount of homeless individuals we have in the territory?
well, you saw the $18 million that was just put aside for a mental health facility. I hope that that's going
Yes.
to include also is some space for our homeless population because mental illness
Mm-hmm.
and homelessness are connected. I'd like to
Yes.
see some of those schools that have been shut down converted into
Mm-hmm.
facilities for our homeless people. I like us to first treat them and then make sure that they are transitioned out into a structure that can provide, there's a laundry, there's a rec room. And I see maybe Charles Emmanuel School or Evelyn Williams or John Woodson that was shut down. Any of these facilities that could be repurposed. Even the Jovensa Vocational School on the highway,
Mm-hmm.
that would be a
Yes.
good location that to
Mm-hmm.
use to take our homeless off the streets and provide
Mm-hmm.
them the services they need in these facilities, and then help transition them out. Right,
Mm-hmm.
that would be like for me like the first uh, course of action.
Yes, yes, yes. And before I ask my last topic, We got a question about
Mhm.
my last topic. We have a commenter, and he asked you specifically, what is your opinion on public works with the potholes in St. Croix? What are your thoughts on that?
I believe that public works should be bifurcated. We should have a public works a department that is solely responsible for St. Croix and the one that's solely responsible for St. Thomas and St. John. If you see some of our roads are getting paved and then there are these areas that are not being touched,
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe that there's a real method that is being deployed to ensure that when you start a paving project that you finish that paving project. So there's
Mm-hmm.
this hodgepodge kind of work being done. So I would support and I would encourage the senators to consider separating the agency, right? Funding St.
Mm-hmm.
Croix, and the commissioner doesn't, is he's, I mean, if you have to live in St. Croix to understand St. Croix's needs. And maybe we
Mm-hmm.
don't need one commissioner. Maybe we need a director for St. Croix and a director for St. Thomas. Have the funding go directly for St. Croix for whatever that is, and let it be spent on St. Croix because the St. Croix people would know what St. Croix needs are. In fact, there is a protest at Williams Delight on Monday, 9 o'clock,
Mm-hmm.
regarding the Williams Delight Road. That I mean, it looks like a war zone. I don't know if you've been there. So
Mm-hmm.
I think
Yeah.
public works is a reason for a lot of the stress that we live through every day due to the
Mm-hmm.
conditions of our roads.
Yes, yes, yes. I hope that answered your question, sir. So my last two topics I want to talk about is first one, GRS. What do you
Yeah.
see as something that they need to continue doing to ensure that the GRS can remain balanced and stable so that our retirees can be able to have a system that they can depend on when they decide to retire?
Well, I know that the fix that they did a couple years ago was only going to be a temporary fix, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they were
Yes.
looking at, I don't know, almost close to $3 billion shortfall. So I'm not sure what that looks like now, but I know it was a temporary fix. I always believe that we needed to separate it, that we need to give people who come into government the first time an opportunity to
Mm-hmm.
have their own 401k. And you should
Mm-hmm.
have taken people earlier on and said, are you prepared to move on and move your monies to a different place? I don't think that GRS can be sustained forever.
Mm-hmm.
That's my opinion. We have seen many pension plans across the country in these states that are all struggling. They're all
Mm-hmm.
struggling because of the way that they operate. So there's got to be, for me, I think, a separation, and we talked about that when I was in the legislature, separating new people that are coming into the system, and maybe using the University of the Virgin Islands uses, I forget the name of their plan, but they have a very good plan that we might be able to transfer our employees to, because part of the reason that the GRS is in trouble is very top heavy, and the
Mm-hmm.
administrative cost for the GRS, I think, are a problem and it should concern us all. So I would rather just turn it over to another entity, like a third party, like the one that does UVI, and say, here, run our pension plan, and so that our employees at least have something that they can depend on when they're retiring.
Yes. And my last question, my last step is government efficiency. What would be something that you would work on, or you any ideas you have that you think we could improve on government efficiency and accountability? Because that was a main issue people were talking about, highlighting. They felt like we have a democratic governor, a democratic senate, and accountability and efficiency is not always present. So, what are some of your ideas or thoughts on government efficiency and accountability, and how we could improve that, and how we could get that at least started for the next 2 years?
Well, I think for government accountability, we need to be clear that if someone is charged or and then found guilty of corruption, misuse of public funds, they should lose their pension, right? I mean, the punishment should really fit the crime. And if you
Mm-hmm.
are misusing the trust of the public, and you're misusing public funds, it should be that your pension goes away. That would be one way, I think, to make sure that people know what the repercussions would be and what the consequences are of their actions. For efficiency reasons, I feel that all of the federal funding that comes to the territory and is significant is not
Mm-hmm.
maximized. And the only way to do that is if the legislature works in conjunction with the executive branch, particularly these government agencies, that have
Mhm.
federal funding that has come down the pipe to ensure that these monies get spent timely. It's not just good enough to bring them into the chamber and chastise them, right?
Mhm.
Half the time they're not going to tell you the truth. But if you can have meetings with them and ask them, what is it that I can do to help you spend these federal dollars? Because we get a lot
Mhm.
of federal dollars, $18 billion in monies that have come into the territory. Imagine
Mhm.
if we were more efficient in the way we spend these federal dollars, the jobs that we could create. Just
Yes.
imagine the just imagine the taxes that would come out of that, right?
Mhm.
So for efficiency reasons, I think we need to pay more attention to federal dollars because that's where the money is. It's not our $1.2 billion budget. That is peanuts compared to all of the federal dollars that come into this territory that are not spent timely
Mhm.
or efficiently.
Yes, yes, yes. So for that, my last question, and this is just you. What's next? What is next for you? In the next 2 years, are you planning to run again in 2026? You don't have to tell me now if you're still thinking about it. But what
Hmm.
is your plan? What are you looking at? Staying active with the people. Like, where's your mindset now after the election is over?
Well, I'm still very active and I started an investigative reporting podcast. So every week I try to highlight something. I also don't want to saturate people with bad news. I mean, we are in the holidays and I
Mhm.
think it's important for us to also highlight the things that are working. Not everything is broken, right?
Yes. Mhm.
And so I plan to continue with my podcast. I plan to continue to remain engaged. At this moment, I
Mhm.
feel like I would like to run again.
Mhm.
But you never know. 2 years from now, anything can happen. I have
Exactly.
not closed the doors, so the possibility for that. It
Mhm.
would be good. It would be good to give it another shot and see what the people really want.
Mhm.
But I'm
Yeah.
thankful for every single person that went out and wrote our names in.
Yes. Yes. So, to the people of the United States Virgin Islands, I want to just thank you for tuning in to our first episode of VI and We. You all know it's a bi-weekly show, so we won't be on next week, but we'll be on the following week, December 28th. And I have the utmost pleasure of interviewing Delegate-elect Rudel Hodge to the Sixth Constitutional Convention. And I'm really
All
excited to
right.
see what another young man in the community is doing and what his perspective is going to be on the Constitutional Convention. And mind you, this is the sixth time. So I'm excited to see what his thoughts are coming to that. So to the people again, I want to first just thank former Senator O'Reilly for being here with us
Thank you.
and being able to have this conversation. And I think it was very productive, getting some
Thank
insight
you.
into what is going on with the Virgin Islands politics and where we're moving and how we're moving forward. And I want to just thank the Active Advocates team for allowing me to, of course, host the show. And we're planning to make some moves and hopefully bring some real conversations back into the Virgin Islands and not this scripted fake conversations, and really bring some perspective that I think you all will enjoy. So with that being said, we're going to have our close out. The video is going to close us out, and then we'll see
Thank
you all
you.
again. Take care.